So I saw a couple of films at MIF 2022, and yes, I understand the festival is still going on, but each ticket is $20 and I can't really justify that over basic human needs. Which is ironic if you've seen how things have been going lately. The first film I saw was Triangle of Sadness. This is the latest film from writer-director of Force Majeure and The Square. Now I really loved Force Majeure, but didn't really quite connect with The Square. It felt very surface level in its satire, and a lot of humor really just wasn't for me. And unfortunately, Triangle of Sadness was a similar experience. If you are interested in the film, I would suggest not googling it, as it basically just spoils the plot. All you really need to know is rich people on a boat being rich. What really dragged this film down for me was its runtime. This film is 2 hours and 30 minutes, and for what the goals of the film are, it felt really unnecessary. And a lot of my criticisms would be lessened by simply cutting down the length. The film is essentially a series of character-based gags with a shoestring plot, tying it all together into something resembling a noose, but made even sadder by how it probably wouldn't kill or choke you, if you're into that sort of thing. I can't stress enough how better this film would be if it was just under 2 hours. I've seen many people say this film is maximalist, and if you think that, you either learnt a new word today or are fucking boring. Because by about the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th time someone projectile vomits, it's not funny, it's just an exercise in patience and a want for the scene to progress. That isn't to say the film is unfunny, there were several moments that I laughed, but the repetitive nature of the film really diminished the experience. I also didn't find the satire that interesting or unique. Rich people, bad and selfish. Where have I never seen this before? There is also a lengthy scene showing the vapid lifestyle of Instagram models taking photos of themselves but not actually enjoying the things in the real world, which has totally never been done before. Again, I wouldn't be this harsh if the runtime was not this long. I was even enjoying the film's bizarre structure with the film being split into 3 parts, but given the length and the non-existent plot, it felt like part 3 could have ended at any point. That isn't to say the film is all bad, it's decently well shot, but nowhere near the quality of Force Majeure. All of the characters are well defined and well performed. I particularly enjoyed the old British couple and what winds up happening to them. The guy from the Pusher trilogy plays a capitalist Russian, and the rapport he has with Woody Harrelson was entertaining. I didn't hate this film, but the parts that I enjoyed aren't enough to get me to watch it again, and I'm giving this a 5 or 6 out of 10. The next film I saw was R.M.N. This is from the director of 4 Months, 3 Weeks, 2 Days and Graduation. Both films I absolutely love, and I would recommend if you like slower character dramas. Aside from the odd titling, R.M.N. did not disappoint. This is basically Mungiu's The White Ribbon, a film that I also love. Whilst I haven't seen this writer-director's other films, R.M.N. is much larger in scope but still retains the human core. It's simultaneously a film about an estranged father teaching his son how to survive the harsh world around them, and about a small town's growing hostility and racial prejudice towards foreign workers. The way that Mungiu writes dialogue feels so natural, especially during larger dinner scenes where multiple characters are speaking or interjecting. There is even a near 20-minute long take of a town hall meeting with tons of speaking roles, characters interjecting and talking over each other, and just general chaos. And it is quite impressive and insanely immersive to watch all these people argue. Now, I don't know a lot about the political climate of Hotel Transylvania, I think someone did stuff, but I absolutely love films that respect audience intelligence when it comes to socio-political discussions. That is to say, this is no Don't Look Up. R.M.N. is mature in equally presenting both sides of political discourse. It does not endorse nor condone, it just shows events unfolding. The cinematography and locations are equally beautiful and hostile. Everything exists in dichotomy, a ruthless and isolating mountain range also offering awe-inspired beauty. The tenderness and care of community hiding violence and hatred, and the dichotomy of you still watching this video but not really caring. The characters are insanely well written and performed. I always had a vague sense where the plot was leading, but when it reached its third act, I had no idea where it was going to go, and I absolutely loved it. This is a layered and emotional film, please go watch it, 9 or possibly 10 out of 10. I then saw You Won't Be Alone. This is the debut feature of Goran Stolevski, with MIF simultaneously playing both this and his new film, Of an Age. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see Of an Age, but I did enjoy You Won't Be Alone. Now, the comparisons to Terrence Malick are nigh unavoidable due to the poetic and exploratory aesthetics, but also largely because everyone else has already made this comparison. So I set you this impossible challenge: try to write a review without foaming at a mouth for a filmmaker that you probably haven't even seen. Because comparison is the lowest form of critique, and if you disagree, this is a reminder that I am currently in your walls. Even so, I feel like a fairer comparison is Andrea Arnold's adaptation of Wuthering Heights. both in 4x3 with a focus on textures of an environment acting as prophetic fallacy for the intensely emotional characters reveling in their shared depravity and lust, spiraling into overwhelming fits of rage and love, and just when you think the film is becoming its own, they literally use a track from Tree of Life. Add in the existential ASMR over the top of nature shots, and yeah, this film isn't exactly subtle in wearing its influences on its sleeve. Unfortunately, a lot of the effects also followed this ilk. There are some CG animal transformations that didn't look great, there were a couple of gore effects that felt very cheap, and the older witch's makeup was very plasticky when shot in direct sunlight. What also didn't help was the performance. It's a good vocal performance, but simply putting old age makeup on someone is only half of it. The actor needs to physically embody mannerisms of the elderly, which is made doubly strange in how very well detailed the mannerisms were for the main character. I get that them drinking blood rejuvenates them, and if anything that should offer a more interesting balance of young and old mannerisms, but it didn't. The structure was a bit repetitive. It's basically just the witch wandering around from person to person to find love, but each encounter doesn't really bring any more depth to it. I wanted to learn more about the Macedonian culture, but it felt like it was only just scratching the surface. It's still incredibly well shot and very atmospheric. It definitely will be a divisive film, but I enjoyed it, and I'm giving this one a 7 out of 10. And the last film I saw was Vortex. This is the latest film from notorious French-Argentinian director Gaspar Noé. Now I do have a conflicted relationship with his filmography. I kind of hated love in a lot of his short films, but I absolutely adore Climax and Irreversible. Regardless of whether I like the narrative or characters, I know that getting into any Noé film I can at least expect some interesting filmmaking behind it, and that's more or less the experience I had with Vortex. This is a film about an aging couple and the slow deteriorating effects of dementia. Narratively, it's basically the same experience as Mikhail Haneke's Amour, but what makes Vortex interesting is its stylization. The film is entirely told in split-screen dual perspectives on the same narrative, so the characters might be sitting across from each other, then one would leave the room and the half of the frame would follow them, whilst the other half would stay with the other character. It is an interesting style that for what the most part is effectively utilized to tell its story. However, there were a lot of technical flaws. There were a lot of shots that were digitally noisy, a couple of shots with the resolution quality noticeably degraded, and there was also a lot of distracting post-stabilization. Climax also had this, but the characters and situations were enough to lessen this criticism. Unfortunately, the characters of Climax aren't that interesting. Dario Argento plays a Noé self-insert, which of course he does. This is a Gaspar Noé film. It's about as expected as The Sunrise, which is probably the most annoying part of his films, along with the constant pontificating on the purpose of film and dreams, and how films like dreams and dreams like films, and how films are dreams and dreams and dreams are films and dreams, and now you're beginning to see how annoying it is. There are lengthy sections where Dario Argento just monologues about dreams and film without going into any more depth, and this happens multiple times. If the desired effect was to be frustrated by the lack of in-depth psychoanalysis, then congratulations, you did it, gold star, but that doesn't mean I'm going to invite you to my next party. I saw this with my disgustingly French friend, and apparently Argento's performance was not that great. I mean, I didn't think it was good either, but I don't speak spider tongue. That being said, the son and the mother's performances were actually pretty great, aided by how they weren't just Noé's self-insert. Speaking of self-congratulating, Noé's persistent technique of using frames of black in between edits makes a return. And whilst it worked well in Climax and Enter the Void to render the passage of time and the effect of blinking, it really didn't work here. The way the film is constructed with long take tracking shots, it felt largely unnecessary to break that rhythm, especially when it's not a temporal jump cut. It also feels largely cheated when a tracking shot leading into a dialogue scene has frames of black right before a character starts speaking. I did get used to it later on and very much enjoyed several of the lengthy dialogue scenes with the son. The characters and their mannerisms felt honest in those scenes, and I almost wish it was the entire film. I would be much less critical of this film if the experience wasn't just a lesser version of Amour. The long takes, repetitive locations, and focus on mundane actions in Amour trap you in the quiet suffering of despair. This was always going to happen. You could not escape this fate. All that is left is the fall. And yet somehow it didn't contain unnecessarily graphic sex scenes. 6 out of 10, go back to more unhinged movies.